So we're talking about Mesopotamia, and Mesopotamia is one of the earliest civilizations. It's actually really the earliest known civilization that there is, and it developed around the Tigris and Euphrates rivers in modern-day Iraq. That's where Iraq is today. And Mesopotamia means the land between the rivers. Now, people migrated to this area and found rich soils and food from the rivers, such as fish and waterfowl. They were able to plant things easily. Now, Section 1 talks about the rise of Sumer, and Sumeria is in southern Mesopotamia around 3500 BC is when this started. And it's the oldest known civilization. And they tried to control the river flood with levees and use irrigation ditches, and they were very well organized. Irrigation took a lot of work. They developed cities like Ur, and this is a picture of Ur here. And they used sun-baked bricks that were mud and reed for building, so it was pretty well organized. Now, if you look here next, what we got is we've got the city-states. That's really important to understand. It's going to be important, something that we're going to go back to again and again. This concept of how the city-state is something, a form of government that controls an area. And basically, if you look back for a second here, this here was one of the early city-states that ends up being Ur. And if you go back here, this is another picture of Ur. And the city-state was made up of the city and the surrounding farming area. And the rich generally lived in the center of the city, the middle class lived next, and the low furthest out. There were wars frequently between the city-states. Now, all the city-states kind of had competition. So one of the things that they also all had was something called a ziggurat, which was a temple to a god. And this was at the center of each city. And this is an example of the ziggurat. And this is in Ur again. And the area around the ziggurat were called the courts. And this was where schools and markets were held. It was kind of a public area. Lots of gods who supposedly controlled all of nature were worshipped. Basically, the ziggurat would worship those gods. And people believed that they were on earth to serve the gods, so they better be in their good graces. And priests were very powerful, since they were the ones who obviously knew best. Now, if we move on here, school was only for rich boys, since they could learn writing and become a scribe. This is an example of cuneiform. Cuneiform was a system of writing using wedges and lines, all from picture writing. And it just made it something that people could do, because it would be hard to draw a picture particularly well. But now women had the right to own property and run businesses, but wives and children could be sold as slaves and could be divorced easily. Yeah, so not very progressive in that way. Children were expected to support their parents in their old age. It was a good idea for someone to support their parents in their old age. And the priests and kings, they were the most powerful rulers. They became priest kings. And priest kings got advice from the assembly of free men, but this gradually became something that was hereditary, so people actually passed it down. That's actually a picture of Gilgamesh, or the mythical king, or a rendering of him. Now, later on in Mesopotamia, there were other empires as well. Some civilizations became powerful when Ur faded. And you see here we got Sumerian, then further up we got Akkadian Empire, and over here we got Egypt, which we'll deal with next time. Sargon I ruled Mesopotamia, conquered a lot of the area, and he united the city-states into the first empire, which was a group of states under one ruler. He took some ideas from Sumeria, and the empire fell apart after Sargon's I's death. Hammurabi of Babylon, he also was an important leader. This is actually from the game Civilization 4. But he established his own empire by conquering Akkad and Sumeria around 500 years after Sargon died. Babylon became the center of Hammurabi's empire. And he took a lot of culture from the groups that he conquered. He made a lot of improvements, and that helped people. The thing he's most well known for is his law code. And it was relatively fair. I mean, it wasn't perfectly fair. Rich people could get off a little bit easier than poor people, but that's where we get the term an eye for an eye. So it was something where you would have to pay an amount if you're rich to compensate for the loss of an eye, but it was a law code, and that's really important to understand because suddenly you've got laws that are written down. It's not just random what happens. Judges were appointed and laws covered most of daily life. If you're found guilty, you could be fined, injured, or killed, depending upon the offense. Actually, they did not have jail, which was interesting. Babylon became an important trading city that traded from faraway places like China and India. After Hammurabi's reign, Babylon declined and the city-states became independent again. So, if we go on next to the contributions, they actually had quite a few major contributions. Lots of people copied ideas like writing from Mesopotamia. The Sumerians also invented the wheel, the plow, and the sailboat. Hard to imagine things particularly without that wheel, or writing for that matter. And they also invented a lot of things that we use every day, which is, in particular, the clock and the calendar. And they had a water clock based on the system of 60, and this was where we get 60 minutes an hour and 60 seconds in a minute. And actually, it's also where we get 360 degrees in a circle. So yes, you can count on the Mesopotamians for giving that to us. And so they were pretty progressive in that way in terms of the knowledge that they had. So that's it.